can you tell us a bit this incredible insight of Goya that you have today?
Yes. Well, we thought Goya is an artist I've always followed closely. He's an artist whose graphic work I collected over several decades now, and it's very interesting if you look, where does a modern collection start? Where does a modern museum start? Where does the 20th century museum start? The MoMA in New York decided it starts with the 1920s Monet water lilies. Ernst Beile decided my collection in Rie in Basel starts with a Nymphea picture by Monet, also from the 1920s. So that's abstraction from a pictorial point of view at the early 20th century. Now you can argue who was the first abstract artist, who was the first modern artist, was it Kandinsky? We've now learned over the last few years that it wasn't Kandinsky, it was Hilmar af Klint. So this is abstraction modernism from a purely pictorial point of view. What we have here with Goya is he's the last European old master and the first true modern master. He stands right at a transition within Europe at the turn of the 19th century, where modernism starts. And it's not characterized by pictorial painting going into abstraction. It has all to do with social criticism. It is the precursor of what we later, 100 years later, learned with Otto Dix and George Grosz. If you look at the pictorial figurative language, you look at the wonderful Bolorego exhibition today, the Tate in London, and this, where you can see, this is where she has her figures from the work of Goya. So he's all about intuition. It's about mysticism. I would say, talking in Spanish terms, Almodovar meets Tarantino. That's Goya for you.
Really, we were in Spain just a couple of days ago, so it is, I do understand this what you're saying, you know, it's the culture, it's an incredible culture.
It's incredible culture, and what we'll see probably in Basel is obviously his fantastic painted oeuvre, which are paintings of incredible value. But knowing what position he had at the court, he was a court painter, so these were commissioned portraits. The printmaking and his wonderful drawings, however, allowed him to go really deep and to attack the sort of the weaknesses and of Spanish society at the time. So he's a chronicler of Spain and a changing world where the bourgeoisie slowly comes up and you can break out of this world of nobility, which was the only chance to raise or to keep your level in society. But that has changed through Goya and at the turn of the 19th century. That's what's exciting. So people become much more independent, they are freer, and they're much more daring. So I think what Goya did with these prints exactly 200 years ago was sensational. And you can imagine that these print series were somewhat risky in their subject matter, because obviously he couldn't afford to lose his position at the court. But their success really came in much later, after his death in 1828, that people understood how modern and forward-thinking he was at the time. So numerous artists sort of referred to him, for Picasso, of course. So we'll show at the end of next month, when we have the whole graphic oeuvre up by Goya, we'll show a major series by Picasso as well, the Tauromachia. So what we can see, we will juxtapose how both artists, living 100 years apart, attack the subject of the bullfight in Spain. And to combine this really shows where modernism was going, starting with Goya in Spain and then later followed by Picasso.
Wonderful. When will it be this?
It will officially start on the 28th of October.
So we're inviting everyone to be here.
Please, please come.
But now, can you give us a little bit of tour of a preview
Yes, of course. So at the moment, what you still see hanging here is the work of Gerhard Rumbler,
Yes.
who was Polka's teacher,
Yes.
teacher of Sigmar Polka, a major figure in abstract art after the Second World War in Germany.
Yes.
And we showed a few examples also because we felt it was necessary to show him here because he's pretty unknown here in Switzerland. Not so much in Germany, of course, but here he is. So it was a great opportunity to organize a one-man show with Gerhard Rumbler. And we have important works from 4 decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes.
And when you look at them, you can see obviously that he was fascinated with Stromby. They exchanged works of art. He followed the Italian masters, somebody like Fontana, of course, in Buri. So a truly fascinating figure, which for many here in Switzerland is pretty still unknown.
Fantastic, fantastic.
So please follow me to the next group.
And I also would like to show the audience that we are having a live, which is a live and feed digital art talk. So we have our first viewers coming to the wonderful gallery. Hello.
Hello.
And you are coming
Hello.
from far away, you're not from here.
We are from Japan,
Yes.
and we are now in Switzerland, so we're happy to discover the gallery and the beautiful exhibition.
Thank you, thank you. So
Welcome.
we are following you. Yes.
So these are 3 works by Gerhard Rumbler from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. This is maybe the earliest one from 1959, the so-called Wochenbild, which is his most sought-after period. You can see that he was friends with Fautry. They exchanged paintings together, and it's what happened in America. This is what happened in Europe just after the war. The move towards abstraction and what they called in France, Tachisme. And his characteristic was these plastic sort of rubber wires, which came up in the late 50s, and he was the first really in Europe to incorporate them in his paintings. And what he tried to tell his students, he was an important art teacher and professor, is that he said, please, you've got to paint pictures which go beyond the border of a normal canvas. So show me how you do it. And then they incorporate these plastic wires and to make it really expand, and the pure flat painting becomes a 3-dimensional work of art, and he's entering the world of sculpture.
It's really, and I love how you choreographically.
Yes, I love this. He said that, and what it says, this is German obviously, and what it says in English, if you don't see anything, you take a closer look.
Bellissimo.
Wonderful, no?
I love it. Sì, veramente stupendo. So,
I wanted to show you this watercolor there in the corner,
yes.
which is interesting because this was the time in the 60s when Polka was his pupil, and you can see clearly where Polka has the idea of these stripes from. Can you see the watercolor there in the corner? That is so typical Polka. There's a whole series by Polka called Streifenbilder, and they exchanged during these years, they exchanged works. So Rumbler received works from Polka and vice versa, where they influenced each other and they loved each other's work.
Very, very interesting. It's one the eye really goes from one wonderful work of art to the other. Here it's
Yes, absolutely. What I like about Rumbler's work is often people associate a very certain kind of art with German artists. Kiefer, Baselitz, even Richter. Rumbler for me is, in a very refreshing way, a not so German artist. I think he's very lyrical, he's very poetical, he's very southern. Maybe a reason is that he had a wonderful place outside Rome, where he came to every year, hence his friendship with Stromby, where he painted and was obviously influenced by a completely different light, a southern light, all Germans had been looking for centuries. And so he's very lyrical, I find, and often can't even imagine that it's always the same artist doing such different things.
Yes, yes.
And there's a very feminine side to his paintings as well, also expressed in his watercolors, which lend a beautiful sort of subtlety to this complete oeuvre.
It is very subtle, very delicate.
And we never talk about prices, but with her I'd love to talk about prices,
Yes.
because you've got major works from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they're not above 100,000 euros. So you can really buy a true masterpiece by an important artist from the 50s and 60s who's represented in many museums,
Yes.
where material is still available, and it doesn't have to be more than 100,000 euros.
Incredible.
So that's interesting too.
Yes.
And a watercolor like this, I mean, look at this. This would be around 9,000 euros.
No.
Yes, that's it. So, you know, giving advice, or we're not here for investment consultancy, but I would say if you look for value for money, whom is the artist to buy?
Wonderful, but thank you. Because you know, it's also sometimes we are so afraid of getting into a gallery, and you know,
I understand.
and
And in general, we don't want to
yes.
talk about money, but
yes.
I really do think when I see great quality and I feel it's undervalued on the international market, I think one should talk about it, one should mention it.
Yes.
It's worth discussing it.
Thank you. No, thank you. It's
Here
very
you've got
for everybody.
beautiful watercolors.
Here we are.
Watercolors here from the 80s. This is from the 80s, this is from the 70s. I think it has such a sort of beautiful, soft touch, these watercolors, that you could almost think of somebody like Louis Bourgeois or an artist like that. And in the middle, you have this incredibly strong, powerful, early picture by Hömer, of course, as well, from 1956, which reminds you of an early Chiraga or a Waltz painting. Waltz, actually, somebody here admired greatly.
And the lighting is wonderful. I have to say.
Thank you
Here-
very much. The lighting is a specialty of Luzi's style. I still haven't figured out how you work out these lights. It's a miracle to me. It's a big secret, but they work.
But they work. But
They
you know,
work.
it makes it also, you know, all this, as you said, work of art come alive, because
Yes.
it's very important in choreography. It's quite
Yes.
important.
Look at these works. Also talking about value for money.
Yes.
This is a wonderful cycle of prints
Yes.
from 1959. It's
Yes.
the best date for Hömer, really. And one print, small edition. What's the edition like? Let's have a look. It's 45. One print is not worth more. It doesn't cost more than 3,000 euros. Are they wonderful?
Yes, they are beautiful. These are, it's all 6 of them, or they can-
No, each.
Yes, each.
So one should buy it as a set because
As a
it was
set,
published
as a
as a
set,
set. And I think at the time he put so much energy in printmaking and drawing.
Yes.
It was for him a medium equivalent and as important as painting.
Beautiful.
Nice, no?
Yes. So we are.
Now we enter the world of Goya.
Oh la la. Yes,
Oh la
we
la.
are here.
Francisco Jose Goya y Lucientes.
Yes.
It's a very long name, but during our research we found out that the nobility, the DE, the de Goya, is probably something which was sort of acquired, we don't know through which channels. Lucientes, obviously, the name of the mother's family, and generally today he's just recognized as Francisco Goya, full stop. So, in these days, you have to imagine 1746 to 1828. Just look at the date. This is Baroque time. This is the age of Baroque, where he grew out of very quickly, obviously, and created this absolute magical and mysterious world. As a true Spaniard, the bullfight.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. What you see here is a bullfight scene in Madrid. He loved to go to the bullfight. It's part of Spanish culture, it's part of Spanish tradition. And just like Goya, 150 years later, he went every Sunday, he went to the bullfight. And you had all sorts of different schedules and who was fighting with whom and which torero and who he was assisted by. And there was a special sequence to the order of the day, to these fights. And it was all about drama. And if you see this, I would almost say it's the precursor of photography.
Yes.
It's what he did there in order to show what happened on a Sunday afternoon there is drawn with such spontaneity that you think you're part of it. You think you're just sitting in the arena with all these people. And where he is an absolute master, if you go close, is by this black and white, bright and dark juxtaposition to create this drama. I mean, here you can see the white highlights on the bull's back here, and on the waistcoat here of the bullfighter. And you see, the rest is dark. And what is this chap doing here? He's leaning on this fence, and these guys dare to sort of intervene because they're so excited. One wanted to get close, and yet escape. But you wanted to get as close to the danger as possible, and obviously try to escape alive.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful testimony of weakness of these times, which is, as you said, we can feel the people's emotions, the fear, the emotions,
Yes.
the adrenaline.
Yes, and obviously we live in a completely different time. You could argue, oh, bullfight, this is not socially acceptable anymore. But you speak to even young Spanish people, lots of young Spanish people, and in a way they agree, but they also say, well, it's part of our culture. We must somehow preserve it. And it's very interesting to follow that debate. And we will have, as I said, by Picasso, the Taramaki, and we will show that series as well and juxtapose it. And you will see it in 4 weeks, you will see it in the entrance area, Picasso and Goya. And Picasso really admired Goya. He said he was my mentor.
Bellissimo. As I said, we can't wait to be there in 4 weeks, so we are going to follow you again. But here, you can feel all the passion here. That's fantastic.
I love Goya. This is the man himself in about sort of 1799. So he was a very dashing gentleman. He was, and fashion was all the rage at the time, and he was completely in it. Also, as you can imagine, as a court painter, he followed this whole culture, and so it can be seen by such a marvelous sort of jacket here with a cravat and this very fancy hat, bowler hat on, the cylinder.
Bellissimo, bellissimo. This is a self-portrait. Self-portrait?
That's a self-portrait, yes. That's a self-portrait, and it's the first plate of the Frank's Capriccio series. It's plate 1, and then you have 79 plates. Just go closely. How weird is all this? It has wonderful Spanish titles. I mean, look at this here. And there's so much humor and satire in his work, in Goya's work. And here he looks at the book, the family book of his ancestors. And obviously they're all Thuggies, needless to say.
Yes.
And then in the same series, you've got this. And you think, how on earth? I mean, you can hardly invent this.
And this is also you put on your as a symbol of Goya.
Totally. These monsters he paints here. I mean, these grimaces and their facial expressions. I mean, they're out of this world, these creatures. They're not from this world. And Also, again, you think of the work of Kubin, the Austrian guy, 100 years later. He did drawings like this, but knowing that Goya did this 100 years earlier is extraordinary. One of his most famous prints from the series, which is always cited, is this print here.
Yes.
Hardly everybody knows it, and there's hardly anybody who hasn't gone through the stage. This poor chap is in right now. It's Spanish, and it means the dream of reason gives birth to monsters. The dream of reason gives birth to monsters. So I think all of us had nightmares at some stage in their lives, and you can really feel with this poor chap what he must have gone through during that particular night. And these monsters are these birds who close in on him. And you think of Hitchcock, the birds, he must have seen this print, no?
Yes, I think it.
So that's another thing. It's one would love to do a show one day, which I'm sure we'll do one day. Film and art, how they influence each other.
They do.
They do, absolutely.
They do.
Yeah.
Like the precursor of our times.
Yeah.
Yes. Fantastic.
These three prints are from the series of the Proverbios.
Yes.
They were published after the artist's death. He didn't dare to publish them during his lifetime. He feared for his very handsome allowance, his pension from the royal court. So these were published just after his death. But look at the images. I mean, he did obviously all these copper plates. He etched himself, only him. And then you see these flying creatures here. It's the old dream of mankind to be able to fly. And it's a timeless dream which will never stop. And today you've got guys jumping from high cliffs with jumpsuits. It all started here, and where it really started is obviously with the wonderful drawings of Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
Flying machine.
It's a beautiful, beautiful room for everybody to come and see. I think, of course, as we always say, it's beautiful to use digitalization, so that we are having all our audience from different parts of the world, but also the most important thing would be to come here and see it, because it's incredible to see these works of art just so close by.
That's exactly right what you say. You have to go close.
Yes, yeah.
You can't just run past it and sort of say, I've seen it.
Yes.
The whole idea is that you get close also to discover the technical mastery Goya employs in his work, because he's really an absolute master printmaker.
The detail is...
The detail is amazing.
Yes. Wonderful. This one are really, all of them are beautiful. And then here we have another one that we...
That's a single print,
yes,
which is not part of the series. In The Prisoner, it's called, and isn't that fantastic? This brace around his feet, the expression of torture in prison. It is so well captivated, and I mean, these images, you see them today, you think of prison scenes, and you think this could be today still.
And yes, as you said, you can't see his face. But
you don't need to.
You don't need to.
He's an example of a man in prison. For whatever reason, we don't know why. Why he's in prison. We don't know whether it's justified. But we just see his suffering. And you almost want to say, no matter what this man did, you can't treat people like this. So, you want to identify it. And this is what's special about his art. Yes, it's already 200 years old, but Goya's work is absolutely timeless. And it will remain timeless for the next 100 years, I'm sure.
Thank you, Andreas. It is really our honor to be here with you today and to share this as you said, it's beautiful to hear your knowledge on this incredible exhibition. And so I invite everybody to come and visit during Juilliard weekend if you can, or during until October.
Sure, absolutely.
So
thank you. Enjoy your weekend.